October 23rd. I'm going to call the October 23rd, 2014 meeting of the Edina Transportation Commission to order, and we'll start with roll call.
Chair Bass.
Here.
Member Betke. Member Campbell. Here. Member Iyer.
Here.
Member Janovi. Here. Member LaForce. Member Nelson.
Here.
Member Olson.
Here.
Member Rummel. Here. Member Spanicky.
Here.
And Member Whited.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any edits or changes to the agenda? Okay, so hearing none, if we can have a motion. Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay? Okay, motion carries. We will approve the minutes now. Let's take a look at the meeting minutes from September 18th. Any changes or edits to the meeting minutes? None? Excellent job, Sharon. So is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 18th?
Second.
And all in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nays? Motion carries. Okay. All right. So the next item on the agenda is community comment. And we take comments on any items that are not on the agenda this evening. And anyone who is here to speak up and come up to the podium? No? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to reports and recommendations and begin with the Arden Park D Neighborhood Draft Engineering Report. And Director Milner?
Commissioners, thank you. We'll start with the Arden Park D Neighborhood Roadway Improvement Project. So just for some project details, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but the project's located just south of 50th Street, west of France Avenue, and north of 54th Street with the Minnehaha Creek on the west side. There's 224 properties, 3 are city-owned. There's about 2.3 miles of roads, and there's currently a half mile of sidewalks on Halifax Avenue and on 52nd. So it was initiated as part of the city's street reconstruction program. We knew this was a utility-driven project in that all the curb was going to come out, so we felt like this might be a good project to start implementing many of our living streets elements from the policy that was adopted, and some of those elements from our draft living streets plan to really begin thinking about how much space we need for automobiles in our roadways. We've also had discussions with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District on partnering to go above the normal stormwater improvements that we do on our normal street reconstruction projects and try to go above and beyond with some of those living streets elements. At the August 19th City Council meeting, the City Council chose to remove the sidewalks on Juanita and Indianola. Were removed from the project scope. Those were are shown in the comprehensive plan for sidewalk facilities, but those were removed at that council meeting. And we are planning to coordinate this project with our 54th Street project to get economies of scales for construction. If you recall, we went out for bids on the 54th Street project, received one bid last spring that was way above our estimate. So we're going to combine the bids on these two projects, have one contractor. It eases coordination with construction and also hopefully get some good bid numbers. With that, we'll hand it off to Toby Muse, who's with SEH. They are doing the engineering on this project for us.
Thanks, Director Milner. I'll start out talking about some of the existing roadway details within the neighborhood, and then I'll move into what the proposed improvements are as well. The streets in the neighborhood were originally constructed in the 1940s. A majority of them have concrete curb and gutter, and they vary in width. Most of the streets are right around 30 feet wide. Here's a couple pictures on this slide that show typical pavement condition within the neighborhood. It's pretty poor in general. ADT within the neighborhood varies from a low point of 120 up to 1,170. The low point is right along Juanita Avenue. Not a lot of vehicles per day in that area, but also along Halifax Avenue, that changes to the 1170. 85th percentile speeds range from 25 to 32 miles an hour. Again, the higher speeds are seen along Halifax Avenue, usually because of the cut-through traffic from 50th heading down to 54th or vice versa in the other direction. There are a couple intersections within the neighborhood with large expanses of pavement and or long radius curb lines. It allows vehicles to turn at a higher speed than is typical. It diminishes pedestrian crossing safety, and it also requires additional resources from the city public works staff for maintaining that pavement. There is an existing alley within the public right-of-way within this neighborhood. It resides between Halifax Avenue and Minnehaha Boulevard. It consists of three different materials. It's pavement, gravel, and turf. As you work your way from north to south, from 52nd south, starts out as pavement, turns to gravel, and then eventually it's more or less a worn path, as shown in the picture in the lower left. It varies in width from 10 to 12 feet, and public works staff typically on an annual basis is out in the gravel portion of the alley about 3 to 4 times a year trying to address drainage and erosion issues that are occurring. We'll move on to the existing lighting system within the neighborhood. There are existing streetlights throughout the neighborhood. Most of them are owned by Xcel Energy. However, there are 6 light poles within the neighborhood shown in the black box on the slide that are owned by the city. The wiring between these lights is a direct buried wire, and the city has seen over time that the wire is in pretty bad condition in terms of maintaining it. So they've deemed that it's kind of reached the end of its useful life. Let's move into the proposed improvements within the neighborhood. In general, all of the pavement surface will be removed and replaced. As Chad mentioned, new curb and gutter throughout the neighborhood is proposed, and as Director Milner mentioned, the implementation of some design elements from the draft Living Streets plan. Those elements are shown on these typical sections here, and this is the kind of the initial communications that were sent out to the neighborhood in terms of what the streets could look like while incorporating the Living Streets elements. And in general, what that is a 24-foot wide roadway width that includes a 17-foot wide two-way driving lane, a 7-foot parking lane, and then also a minimum of a 5-foot boulevard and a 5-foot sidewalk. Now, there's a difference between these two. The lower section is for connector streets. Those are typically higher volume streets. In this neighborhood, connectors were identified as Minnehaha Boulevard, Arden Avenue, and Halifax Avenue. And all the other streets within the neighborhood were deemed the local street, which is the upper right-hand section. Sidewalks are not required on local streets. If they meet some minimum criteria, staff could propose it based on the draft Living Streets plan. So we started out using these sections as our go-by for preliminary engineering and laying it out within the neighborhood to see how it fit the context of the neighborhood. And what we found initially was there's a lot of existing mature trees within the boulevards, and setting a 5-foot boulevard and then a 5-foot wide walk in those boulevards would impact those mature trees within the neighborhood pretty significantly. And obviously that would potentially ruin the character of the neighborhood. So one idea was to move that sidewalk in towards the existing curb line. And what was proposed and initially shown to the neighborhood at the first informational meeting was a 5-foot sidewalk right up against the back of curb that was separated by a 1-foot wide exposed aggregate buffer strip. And it wasn't an ideal section or design from staff's perspective. And what we heard from the neighborhood is aesthetically, this doesn't really fit the character of the neighborhood either. Can we do something else? And essentially what was landed on was this section, mainly along Arden Avenue and 52nd, because that's where the majority of the proposed sidewalk is going to go, or is proposed anyway. And what's included there is a 3-foot wide boulevard, or a turf boulevard with a 4-foot wide sidewalk. Again, it's not an ideal design in terms of from staff's perspective for maintenance and such. However, it does fit the existing character of the neighborhood. As Chad mentioned, there's an existing sidewalk over at Halifax Avenue that has this general layout, a 3-foot boulevard with a 4-foot wide sidewalk. So this section kind of better fits the context of the neighborhood. In terms of the locations of sidewalk, this graphic displays that along the east side of Arden Avenue is where the sidewalk is proposed as part of this draft study. Also along the south side of 52nd Street, along the west side of Minnehaha Boulevard, and then there's also a small stretch up near the church right just south of 50th on Juanita that is proposed to try and help accommodate some of the pedestrians that use the church facility throughout the week. It should be noted the sidewalk along Minnehaha Boulevard is proposed to be 8 feet wide to accommodate all the use heading to and from Arden Park, which obviously is the destination for the neighborhood. And also in terms of the street widths, all of the streets that don't have sidewalks are proposed to be 27 feet wide face to face. All of the streets that are proposed to have sidewalks are 24 feet wide. And there's one small exception along Minnehaha Boulevard. Staff recognizes that there may be future demand for parking near Arden Park. So the proposal right now is to try and implement a 27-foot wide street along the northern half of Minnehaha Boulevard to potentially accommodate any future parking demands if they come up. I think as of right now, the proposal would be to just leave it one-sided parking on the sidewalk side, and if future demands warrant, then there would be available width to provide some of that parking on the east side as well. As we've mentioned before, there is sidewalk on Halifax Avenue and 52nd Street. That is proposed to stay in place. It would not change. And to enhance pedestrian safety, there are crosswalks proposed at the intersections with 52nd Street and Halifax Avenue and Minnehaha Boulevard. The one intersection I mentioned earlier, 51st and Halifax, to try and decrease some of those vehicle speeds as they turn in, if they're traveling southbound on 51st and they want to take a right into that neighborhood. Typically what happens is some of those vehicles are going so fast they cross over the center line of the roadway and actually get into the northbound lane of Halifax. So a 6-foot wide island is proposed here to try and control those speeds, and the radius would be adjusted a little bit as well. Staff's recognized an opportunity to try and decrease some of the pavement area in the Bruce Avenue and Bruce Place intersection. Here there's already an existing island, but there is opportunity to increase the size of that and ultimately decrease pavement area, which is always something that the city's striving to do. Also, as part of the draft Living Streets plan, there's discussion about decreasing the size of pavement within cul-de-sacs. This represents that idea, a 60-foot cul-de-sac in the Bruce Avenue cul-de-sac, again, adding boulevard space, decreasing pavement space. Parking will still be allowed within the cul-de-sacs. Another cul-de-sac in the area, in the neighborhood, is along Gorgas Avenue. Same thing here, 60-foot wide, also increasing boulevard space. Regarding the alley, proposal at the moment is to pave the gravel area, which is represented by the blue strip in the alley here, and potentially a portion of the paved area. There's an existing stormwater inlet that sits within the alley, and in order to try and adjust that, perhaps lower it to get the drainage to work better, there will be some improvements made to some of that pavement, but not necessarily all of it. Regarding the city-owned streetlight system, within the next week, staff will send out a questionnaire to the neighborhood to ask about what their preference would be for new lighting. And these 4 lights shown in the slide are the options that will be presented to them. Ultimately, the results of that questionnaire will be included in the final feasibility study that's presented at the public improvement hearing. Regarding the project schedule, in September we've wrapped up the draft, at least the draft feasibility report and estimating. We just recently, earlier in the month, presented to the park board. We're here tonight in front of the ETC to gather input from you. December 9th is the public hearing. Plan preparation and bidding, if the project moves forward, would occur between December and February of 2015. April and May is slated tentatively for beginning construction, ending near the end of the year in 2015. Obviously, warranty work occurs in the spring of 2016, and then the final assessment would happen during the summer or the fall of 2016. Just wanted to point out that the public has, at our informational meetings, has been given information through the mailings and at the public meetings that they have every right to come to the public hearing, speak at it. There will be 2 votes by the council at that public improvement hearing. The first vote is going to be for the assessments, where a 4-to-1 vote is needed in favor for the project to move forward, and then there would be a second vote for the PACS-related component, or the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund component, which is the sidewalks, where a 3-to-2 vote is needed.
Before we wrap up, I got a couple points I just wanted to touch on here. The voting on Tuesday night was our first time we had this option for council on the voting between assessment stuff and PACS, and they chose not to use it that night, but at least it's an option for them at the public hearings that they have. So this was something we discussed with them at a work session earlier this year on voting for this. We did have 2 input meetings with the neighborhood. We met in July or August, and then again in September. And we've also got comments from Public Works on the size of the roadways, snow plowing operations, like that Bruce Island. That was for snow plowing operations, to size that the way we did. PD and Fire Department have also commented on the size of the streets and what they need for their operations. We've run the fire truck templates through the intersection there at Halifax for the cars, so it's not an issue with any of those folks getting all that big equipment through the neighborhood. The lighting that Toby talked about, we did present costs already to the neighborhood at the last meeting, so they're aware of the potential assessments associated with it. We just haven't got that questionnaire out to pick a style of light that's preferred for those folks. And then the other piece I wanted to mention was the 27-foot standard section. We've been in front of this commission before, and that's a standard we've used since 2006-07 when Recon Project started. So that's not a new section. What's new with the width of that section is that in this project we're only going to allow parking on one side of the roadway per the Living Streets plan. So the width itself, that's not a change. It's just that thinking of providing basically 6 extra feet for pedestrians or cyclists or whoever wants to use those facilities, because we're doing that section where we don't have sidewalks. So that's the difference with that 27-foot section throughout the neighborhood versus the 24-foot section with a sidewalk. So just wanted to clarify those points, and then be happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of just follow along the line here. So we'll start down at the end. Anna, if you have any comments or questions about it. Pass. Okay. Commissioner Danby?
Should we just do one question at a time?
No, I would just go through all, consolidate.
Oh, you're brave. Okay. When is this is a question for Mark. Mark, when is the council going to see the sidewalk plan and the comp plan change?
November 3rd is the public hearing for that plan.
So yeah, the Planning Commission approved that last night, and it goes to council on the 3rd.
Okay. So the 4-foot sidewalk doesn't match what's in the comp plan change. It also doesn't match what's in the Living Streets draft plan.
Yep.
So why that inconsistency?
We wanted a more aesthetically pleasing. We've heard a lot of comments from the neighborhood that we don't want a concrete sidewalk right on the back of curb. And if you look at this map, there's already almost half the neighborhood already has 4-foot sidewalks. So we feel it's not a stretch to be continuing that 4-foot sidewalk in the neighborhood. If council wants, we can definitely make a 5-foot sidewalk work, but it's going to be right on the back of curb and less aesthetically pleasing facility because it won't have room for the boulevard in that area.
Well, there are places I'm familiar with that have a 2-foot boulevard, and they're landscaped. So, I mean, right now it's showing a 4-foot sidewalk in a 3-foot boulevard.
Correct.
So you could have a 5-foot sidewalk and a 2-foot boulevard. There's also the sidewalk on West 39th in St. Louis Park. I don't know if you've seen that, but that goes around, so it maintains, I think it's a 6-foot sidewalk, and it maintains a nice boulevard, but when there's a tree, it brings the sidewalk up to the curb and goes around it, and it looks really nice and in my view, creates a nice winding look that fits into the neighborhood. So that was my first question. The median, has that been, in the past, there have been concerns about the medians that were placed by Cornelia. The school district has had concerns about, and I know, buses and fire trucks, it should be fine, but has it been run by them?
We have not run it by the school district, but yeah, we figure if a fire truck is bigger than a school bus, we tried to determine if there's any other options to prevent that swinging around that corner at high speeds, and this was the best option we came up with for that. But we can run it by the school district here before we finalize the report with David White and the transportation official.
And will there be any kind of crossing at that point? So crossing Halifax at the median?
Yeah, there'll be a painted thermoplastic crosswalk, because there's a sidewalk on both sides. We'll put the ped right, isn't it? Yeah, there's a sidewalk on the other side. Yeah, we'll do a crossing there. We didn't list it as a crosswalk.
Okay. And then the other crosswalks that are referenced in the plan, do those meet the crosswalk policy, warrants for the crosswalk policy? I didn't see that there were any ped counts.
We did pedestrian counts on Juanita, but I don't know. So we can check that for him. Not right offhand, but looking intuitively with all the users of the park, I think we would make the warrants definitely at Arden and 52nd, but we can check if we have pedestrian counts on 52nd.
Okay. I'll pass for now. I might have more later.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I brought this up at previous meetings. The curb and gutter, in a lot of neighborhoods, it's kind of replaced as it needs to be replaced.
Yep.
What is kind of the plan for this neighborhood? Is that the same plan there, or is this too deteriorated and it all needs to come out?
It has nothing to do with the deterioration of the curb. It has to do with the utilities. So as we've discussed in the past, we try to protect curb where we can if it's not utility driven. This neighborhood has water main issues. We're going to replace every sanitary sewer or any of your water service and sanitary sewer service. So by the time we do all that, almost all the curb's going to be ripped up anyway. So here's where we're putting in new curb and gutter, and that's funded out of the storm sewer fund. But that's the reason why this one's driven versus the other reports you have tonight. We're not doing major utility work, so we're going to protect the curb and do that patch.
So for this project, the majority of it will, or all will be replaced?
It'll be replaced either way, so it's just a matter of where we're going to put it back after all the utility work.
Okay. That's all.
I had a quick question about the island at Bruce Avenue and Bruce Place. Will the city be planting in that island?
You know, that's a unique island. There's an individual that lives there that had that island installed through city staff a few years ago.
Okay.
He maintains it. He put a light out. Actually, that is one of our lights out there, the city lights. But he maintains it. He takes care of it. We're working with him to see what kind of continued treatment to do there, since he was the person that got this one put in. And he's excited about expanding that a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Commissioner Iyer?
I'm going to pass right now. Thank you.
Just a couple comments. One being, you said it did go in front of the park board
Correct.
the other day. Any comments that came forward from that?
They were in support of the, we reviewed the conditions along Arden Park. That's basically what we reviewed with them, and they were in favor of the 8-foot wide sidewalk. The sidewalk there, as it comes off 52nd, it's going to swing behind the trees all the way down up to about where you see the word Minnehaha there. If you recall driving that, the trees get right up to the back of the existing roadway, and this is a pretty low area. This floods all the time. So then we're going to bring that sidewalk up to the behind the back of curb, that 8-foot wide sidewalk, and then again have that 24-foot wide section with no parking. So we won't have a boulevard for that last, let's say 3 or 4 properties, just because it would be a wetland mitigation issue, and we'd have to take quite a few trees to get it through there. And they were in support of the sidewalk.
They were fine with the parking issue as well, or the parking situation as it is and being planned for? Okay.
Yep, we've met with, I've spoken directly with many of the people that live on Minnehaha Boulevard. We had a comment that they're in support of having only parking on one side because it'll be easier for them to back out of their driveways when there's some of those winter operations is what we see is with the hockey and skating down there. So we've gotten concerns about we need a lot of parking on Minnehaha Boulevard. So we called these folks and said, what are you seeing out there during hockey? And they said, there's more parking, but we don't need both sides is what they're telling me. But we felt like we should leave a section of that 27 feet wide, and if we need to, we could do some signage where it's parking different hours or different seasons. You see those around town too. So.
And then where you just mentioned at 51st and Halifax, that crosswalk, or the crosswalk was suggested. Will that, I guess my question is, will that cross the boulevard there, or it looks like it will?
We'd have to, this island I don't think is drawn correctly. We'd put the nose of the island back behind the sidewalk here. I don't think we have room to create a refuge. So like West Shore Drive off of...
right, so I mean, those are elevated. I don't know if this is just a curb or if this is going to be elevated too.
No, it'll be elevated. We'll have to, we're going to put curb. The inside, we're still looking at what kind of vertical features. So at 6 feet wide is what the ones are over in the West Shore, so we can plant some stuff, because if you don't, cars are just going to hit that curb. They're not going to know it. So we're going to do some kind of landscaping.
And plows and things. So
yeah.
I guess what we've done out in France, there's a kind of a refuge there, and I think that might have been where Jennifer was getting at, if there's going to be a crosswalk there or not. But if the crosswalk does come within that boulevard, there might be an opportunity for a little more of a safe refuge area, but I guess you just leave that up to you and in the engineering to determine if that's applicable there or not.
Yeah, with France, we have a lot more room for that nose. Here, I don't know if we'll have, because right here is the travel lane, so we're kind of, the boulevard width is a lot narrower here than what we have on France. But we can look, maybe there's an opportunity, but I would imagine we would, if we went with the same treatment we did on West Shore, pull that behind the sidewalk and then have a painted crosswalk right in front of it. But we'll look and see if it's feasible. I would have a little concern with the turning movements to the left, potentially there to go northbound. But we can run those templates and see how it works with the fire trucks through there.
All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Just a quick question. What have been the major concerns from the residents in this area?
Yep, the major concerns, the first round was the sidewalks on Juanita and Indianola, and then we did the traffic counts. You guys have seen the warrants with the Living Streets plan with the different traffic volumes where we're proposing sidewalks all around town. This doesn't meet our typical warrants of around that 500 vehicles per day, so that's why it warranted. So that was the first issue we heard. The second one we're hearing now is the lack of, they think we need more parking on Minnehaha Boulevard and potentially Bruce, but there's concerns in the whole neighborhood about losing parking on half the roadway. There's always the art fair comes up, but that's a special case, and I don't think we should design our roads for a one weekend special case. If you drive out here, you'll see the roads are pretty empty, similar to much of our other neighborhoods where there isn't parking needs all the time for both sides. So that's the biggest thing we're hearing now is losing the parking on one side. And there's still some comments that we don't need sidewalks. That's a very common one on any sidewalk, especially when you're putting it into a developed area. Arden Park, those folks have been saying they don't want sidewalks. They don't see the need because they haven't been there. We've lived here for 20, 30 years and we've never needed it before. Why do we need it now? So those are pretty common comments we're getting.
I'll pass as well.
Any other questions for Director Milner? Commissioner Janvey?
Thank you. Looking at the median again, how wide are the travel lanes on either side of it?
Either side of that median?
Yeah.
At this one? I believe at West Shore it's 14 feet total. So I think it's 14-foot travel lanes. So you can get a fire truck to swing through. We could look at those details. It's not 11 feet like a standard straight road because you're on a corner. But.
Yeah. And then you mentioned a concern about the turning left movement onto would be Halifax or 51st at that point. But they're coming from a stop. I mean, they'll be stopped, so they'll be going really slowly.
Sure, but the back end of a fire truck potentially. So.
In the past, the at Bike Edina, and maybe Larry, you remember, but there were concerns when the medians were placed in the Cornelia area because especially when there's snow, it reduces the space if a car and a bike are there together. So that's something that I would like to be or have considered. Oh darn! So the PAX fund, does that not pay for street lighting?
It's not paid for street lighting in this case. This is decorative street lighting. So there's the PAX fund can be considered for street lighting when it's more in terms of pedestrian safety that's been identified with pedestrian safety issues.
Like if there were specific intersections that need to be lit up for pedestrian crossings. If we paid for lighting with PAX in a project, if we had one project, all our funding would go towards lighting. It's a very expensive improvement in the neighborhood.
And in this case, it's being replaced because the underground wires are
it's just direct
failing in some way?
Yep, they're out there trying to repair it all the time, and it's just falling apart on them. So
okay.
Our own public works staff is doing that.
So this is kind of a bigger question, and that is, we have this project, and the streets are being narrowed to be consistent with the draft Living Streets plan, and then we have other projects in our packet tonight where they're not. And I understand It's a difference in removing the curb, but I'm having trouble with the inconsistency. And so, yeah.
I can comment on it.
Yeah,
welcome. If we did all of our neighborhood projects to the Living Streets plan, went to 24 feet, we wouldn't have enough funding because of our curb and gutters paid out our stormwater fund. We do 4 to 5 miles of streets now. We'd probably be down to about a mile, maybe 2, and we'd fall way behind in our street pavements rehab. So it's a funding thing. We don't have to rip out all that curb, but if we did, the cost of our projects would skyrocket in the storm sewer fund related category. So that's why that's why we're implementing it where the utilities are kind of driving it now. We still are planning to look at it. Some of those local connector roads, those might be a way where we could do the Living Streets kind of down those more major roadways within our locals and leave the side. I think of Beard Avenue where there's going to be a sidewalk and there's some opportunities there to do some Living Streets elements along Beard. But if you go to Zenith or York, those got 100 cars a day. And the cost to remove all that curb to shrink it 3 feet doesn't seem justified, in my opinion.
So this is really a longer discussion, but when we crafted the Living Streets policy, we put in there a few points on exceptions because we know this kind of thing will come up. And there are exceptions, the criteria for exceptions are clearly outlined. And so I think it's a bigger conversation if there are different ways of looking at the cost. And so, I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts about that, but what keeps coming up is that neighborhoods are being treated differently and that the Living Streets policy is being applied in some cases and not other cases. And I think that reduces the value of the policy, in my view.
So, I don't know if this will be well formulated or not, but I understand take your point, Commissioner Janovy, and understand that it must feel frustrating for residents to see the policy not applied uniformly. And on the other hand, I think we also have the pragmatic issue in the city of our pavement deteriorating and needing to keep up with that in a timely way. And from all the conversations we've had at the Transportation Commission and in road reconstruction projects, understanding that we need to bite off 4 to 5 miles every year and getting to a place where we're doing full curb and gutter in every single project is going to make us fall far behind. And that we need to take a pragmatic and fiscally conservative approach to this. And so it's going to be somewhat inconsistent until we get to a place where we are having to replace virtually all of the utilities. and over, I mean, the job of the commission and the job of the council is to prepare the city for, you know, the next 50 years, the next 70 years. We're looking very far out here. And so, you know, it's going to start incrementally, and then we'll get there eventually. But, you know, we have to weigh all of these, the desire and the vision that we have to reduce impervious surfaces, to meet the transportation needs of all of our residents, not just motorists, and to be fiscally conservative at the same time. So, I don't know, those are my thoughts. I don't know if anybody else has.
Just looking at those exceptions, and there is one that just the city exempts a project due to an excessively disproportionate cost of establishing the living streets elements. And I guess that's what it sounds like is being suggested here.
Correct.
For that size of street, I guess. So
Could to that though, and that is that we haven't seen any comparison. So if we're talking about with the streets being an average of 30 feet wide, and if they could in some cases be taken down to 24 or 27, that's 3 or 6, right? 3 or 6 feet of pavement. So what's the cost of to the residents who get assessed 100% for their street reconstruction for that 3 to 6 feet additional width of pavement, the entire length of the project, and then the maintenance costs over 50 years. So, you know, we didn't see a comparison of the costs. We're looking at different boxes of this is coming out of curb and gutter, and this is coming out of special assessment. We're not looking at the costs in a universal way, or at least we weren't presented that in our packet. And so I do think that whenever there's a challenge, there are different ways to approach it. And so I am concerned about the inconsistency, and you know, I think there's a different way to approach the challenge.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a follow-up about the biking issue that you brought up with the monuments. I live in the Cornelia neighborhood, and those work actually quite well with the narrowing of the street. It kind of causes the bikes to become more car-like, as the bikes and cars will kind of line up together. And I think it did reduce cut-through traffic in the neighborhood, too. It kind of makes it appear to be an entrance to a neighborhood versus just a quick straight shot through there. So I'm in support of them living in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I guess we didn't mention that typically it does reduce if you have to go slower, people aren't going to take that route. And you saw in the traffic volumes, there's 1,100 cars. So hopefully they'll go down to France and use that instead. So,
Commissioner Iyer?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just chime in on Commissioner Genowie's comments. I do think that she's making a more global point here, is that there is an overarching strategy, overarching plan that needs to determine some of these decisions. And I do agree with her that there seems to be an exception here for some reason, exception there for some other reason. So we got to be a little more consistent, and I'm not sure how, but yeah, I do see that. Yeah, so there's a process problem here.
well, the majority of the roads that if you went from, most of them are going to be 27 feet, so the pavement width will be the same on these streets as they would be if you reconstructed all the streets on your other reports tonight. So the pavement, there is, when there's a sidewalk, there's a 3-foot reduction, but the rest of it would be 27, which is what we're proposing with this neighborhood, or if we had to remove the curbs on Countryside, for example, on the other projects you're going to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, this is what you just said, but to say it a different way, you're not putting any 30-foot streets back in this neighborhood.
No,
not new.
So.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just go back to, so this was for our review and comment tonight, and no action is requested. So we'll thank Director Milner and Toby for coming and presenting this to us tonight. And
thank you. Here's the schedule, so we're going to council on the 9th. If you have any further comments, if you think of something here after this meeting, we're still taking comments from individuals through the first few weeks in November, and we'll finalize that report. We're trying to get the council this whole packet of reports at the 2nd November council meeting, so they have some time to review this report and the countryside reports and all the other ones. So if you have any comments, feel free to email myself or Mark, and we can consider those yet too.
Thanks. I will just say that I took some time to go over to this neighborhood because I don't live in this part of the city, and just kind of familiarize myself with the street. And it was in the evening and around Arden Park, 52nd, and Arden was just, I hate to use the word swarm, but it was swarming with people, with joggers and strollers and families and people playing ball at the park. And so I think this, the addition of the sidewalk, I think, is really going to meet the needs of some other folks in the community that haven't been met in the past. So I'm pleased to see that.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. The next item on the agenda tonight is the 2015 Neighborhood Reconstruction Project Draft Engineering Reports, and this is for our review and comment.
I guess I should make one quick introduction to this. If you recall, back at the August ETC meeting, Assistant Engineer Rossi was present to present these projects, certainly in a preliminary way. And at that meeting, we'd let the ETC know that we will get these draft feasibility studies out to you for a review. So there will be no presentation, but we would like to take comment if you have any.
Yep.
And the schedule as of December 9th, in terms of that's when the public hearing will be for the public hearings for these projects as well, would be similar after that point as it was presented to you for Arden Park.
Okay. Maybe we'll start from the other side to take any commissioner comments or questions on any of the engineering studies. And I think if you would, rather than taking one at a time, just if you could offer all of your, I don't know, what would be easier for you in terms of capturing the comments? Would you prefer that we take one study at a time and go through? Let's do that. Okay.
Yeah, let's do
All right,
that.
so we'll start with Countryside H, and if there were any questions or comments on that, we'll move down the line. I'll start with Commissioner Campbell. Okay. Commissioner Spanky? Sorry. Well, it's not fair to always make these guys start.
Oops, no comments on H.
Okay. Nothing? Commissioner Whitehead?
Yeah, I have no comments either.
Okay, thank you. I had a question on it. It seemed like I just wanted to hear if there was any comments from, or reaction from the school district in terms of the addition of sidewalks on their property and near the school.
There was both Director Milner and Assistant Engineer Rossi met with the school district, I believe, twice now, and we have a verbal agreement from them for an easement for the sidewalk along the property, because there's a point where the sidewalk will be jogging behind the trees because there wasn't enough room to put them in front of the trees, and the school district has agreed verbally, like I said, to allow an easement for that sidewalk. We're also talking with them about the potential of, because right now at I forget the name of the street, is it Sun? There's a long series of steps that goes from Arbor to the east to the school, where we're talking with them about the potential of helping them or contributing to the construction of an ADA compliant access at that point. But that's we're looking at in terms of potentially swapping that out for the cost of a sidewalk on Benton, which was removed from the plan because the school district thought that there wasn't a really safe place for pedestrians to be due to all the access points to the school at that point.
Okay. Thanks. Commissioner Olson?
Since Director Milner left, I don't think I'll get an answer, but I'll bring this up anyway. So my question, getting back to the curb and gutter issue, is, and maybe I'll ask this in future meetings, but residents are paying maybe $8,000 to $14,000 for street improvements. How much additional would it cost a resident to have all of the curb and gutter replaced in a neighborhood where it's kind of being done in a patchwork manner? So I'll reserve that for a future meeting, I guess.
That's paid for out of the stormwater utility, right?
Right.
So it wouldn't be directly
So it's a
assessed.
city cost.
But if what's happened in a lot of neighborhoods like mine is they kind of pick and choose which pieces of curb to replace based on age and condition. So you end up kind of with this patchwork we've talked about. How much more would a resident be assessed if they chose to, maybe all the neighbors kind of voted and said, yeah, we'd like to pay for all of this to be replaced. What would be the cost differential for the resident?
Okay. Commissioner Genevieve?
Well, this is a comment again about the street width, and this one, I think all of them say that the average street width in the neighborhoods is 30 feet. So they are going to be replacing the streets at a greater width than the minimum.
But these
Right?
streets aren't being,
They're not
being
the
reconstructed.
curbs aren't
I mean, they're
being
not being, the
reconstructed.
curbs are not being,
Right, the curbs aren't being, that's
Reconstructed.
kind of the whole point.
right.
Is that that they're leaving the curbs in place, choosing to leave the curbs in place rather than remove the curbs and narrow the street, and that's the inconsistency.
I think, again, it's a cost issue in terms of how much of that utility fund would we be able or willing to use to put towards replacing curb and gutter. I think it's clear to me in terms of the Living Streets plan, policy, and the plan, and I've been working a little bit on this, that there does have to be some language addressing these types of exceptions. I think by definition, the Living Streets policy talks about being sensitive to context, and I think the term context may have a broader meaning here. It could be fiscal context as well, or some of these other things that we've been talking about. So those are my thoughts.
One last one with the sidewalks, was lighting reviewed for along the sidewalks?
Not as far as I know, but I will get back to you on that. I'll talk to Director Milner.
Oh, yep.
Can I follow up on that? I did have a question on the streetlights. Just looking at the placement, it looks like a couple places could potentially be quite dark. So I don't know when it's decided, like along Wycliffe Road, there are no lights back there. And that corner by Stewart Avenue by the school seems like that would be awfully dark too. So how is it decided if lights need to be added?
I'll have that discussion with engineering when I get back in terms of what factors go into that.
Okay. Commissioner Rommel?
I'll pass on this one.
Okay. All right, any other comments or questions on Countryside H before we move on? Okay, let's move on to Prospect Knolls B. And we'll start back down here. We'll go the same way.
I'll pass.
Okay.
I didn't dog ear my pages.
It's okay, no rush.
Oh. I was curious on the questionnaire. There was a comment on people run the stop sign at Gleason and Shea. Is that the conversation we had last month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a three-way stop on Gleason Road heading down toward Braemar, or south on Gleason toward Dewey Hill Road. And it's kind of an odd three-way stop. Yeah, we did talk about that at our last meeting, and it's an issue with it being run.
Right. But my understanding is we were going to look at maybe traffic calming, because doing anything with this intersection in this project wouldn't make, there's no chance
Yeah,
to
we're
do
not doing
something
any,
different.
as far as I understand, we're not doing anything to Gleason Road.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I did have just one comment that I wanted to lift up from the questionnaire comments, and it's related to that same three-way stop at Gleason Road and Shea. I can't remember now. I walk there all the time, but it looks like there was a request for a curb cut or wheelchair ramp at the sidewalk at Gleason Road and Shea at that stop sign. And so I'm wondering, I'm thinking that is a request from folks coming from Shea Drive who cross at that three-way stop and get onto the sidewalk
on the west side of Gleason, and I'm wondering if there is a curb ramp there. I'm thinking it's not, because it's a continuous sidewalk on the west side of Gleason Road.
I don't believe there's a curb ramp there,
Okay,
not a
is
curb
that,
cut.
so I just wanted to ask whether that could be addressed.
It could be. Again, we'll have that discussion. All these notes will be shared with engineering,
Okay.
but that's something, right now we're working on an ADA transition plan that
Uh-huh.
would take into account locations like this, but obviously if there's an opportunity to do so during a construction project, then we'd like to take a look at that.
Yeah, that would be great, thanks. Commissioner Olson? Okay, Commissioner Genevieve?
I have just one that it has to do with the language in the sidewalk paragraph, and it's the same language as used in the Dewey Hill project too. And it just says the results from residents' questionnaires show that property owners do not want to add sidewalks. I mean, that's fine to leave in there, but that's also often the case in a neighborhood where the decision is to go ahead with the sidewalk. So I think what is probably more applicable in the decision-making process, at least under current process, is to change it to sidewalks are not shown on the sidewalk plan or the approved sidewalk plan, in order to, at least bring that in as a factor for decision-making.
Yeah, thanks for lifting that up. I had the same reaction as I read that and didn't think to give voice, but I think it would be more accurate to make that change. Commissioner Rummel, any comments on this one?
Not on this one.
Okay. All right, so unless there are any other questions or comments on Prospect Knolls B, we'll move on to Dewey Hill G. And I'm not going to make you go in order again on this one. If there are any questions or comments, feel free to throw them out. Okay, hearing none, this was fairly straightforward too, I think. So I imagine staff will take our questions and comments and.
Yep, we will.
Under
They'll
consideration.
be shared with
Okay.
Staff. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to the 2015 Pedestrian Cyclist Safety Fund projects. Planner Nolan.
Thank you, Chair Bass. So as we discussed earlier this year, wanted to share with you the projects that we currently have listed for 2015 for the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund. And as is stated in the report, which the dates are wrong in the report, rolling over from 2014 to 2015 is about $600,000. It's quite a bit of money, and making our budget for 2015 about $1.7 million for the PACS fund. Potentially that could be used, and if not all used, it also gets rolled over. So the list of projects that you see on the second page is currently what staff is considering for next year. Now, if you look at the sidewalk projects, you'll note that about half of them are in the neighborhood roadway improvement projects that we've been discussing here tonight for next year. In terms of half of the projects. You can see the other projects listed there, some standalone sidewalk projects, and also some pedestrian safety projects. We've got, actually there will be two RRFB, or those flashing beacon crossings that are now in place, two of them on 66th Street, and also on Xerxes and 64th. We've got a couple of those crossings going in next year, one replacing the existing crossing between Galleria and Southdale, and the other at West Shore and 66th is also going in there as well. Otherwise, I'll leave it at that and take questions or comments from the Commission.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Let's start down here.
I don't have any on this one.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Genevieve?
Well, I was wondering what if Cornelia could be added somewhere. There's $300,000 to $400,000 in miscellaneous sidewalk projects that haven't been identified, or maybe there's someplace else in here that Cornelia could be added.
That could be considered a candidate, yes.
Just to follow up on that, the number of feet, I think it's about a 6-mile length from 66th Street to 70th Street. And that would equal probably about 3,500 feet, so it fits right in there.
Yes.
Thought.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Iyer?
So I think this is a good place to add. So when you said Cornelia, which one did you mean, Commissioner Genevieve?
66 to 70.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure if the project that I've been talking about in the past, the one that needs a bridge across from the Art Center, should be on this too. There's really no safe way yet for Southeast Atlanta students to go to Southview. And I think they were planning some kind of bike to school day, I believe. And I don't think even the teachers wanted to supervise that. So, so it's pretty dangerous. So that, I don't know, should be added. I was going to maybe follow up. I think there was a couple of things that we were going to follow up on with that whole thing, but I don't know where it's at. But
Are you referring to a bicycle and pedestrian bridge over the highway?
yes.
Okay. That's $2 to $3 million, so that would be something that we would look at making the PACS fund dollars go farther by partnering with MnDOT or finding ways to get something like that funded.
And that, if I'm remembering correctly, that recommendation to look at the access over 62 to specifically support students coming from Southeast Edina to Southview did end up in the recommendations that in the approved active routes to school plan. So that, I think, gives us, and it gives staff sort of a starting point to begin talking and planning more around and working with other entities like MnDOT on that, because it's going to have to require their support. And
I would like to add that the existing, you could call it a bike route on Valley View under Highway 62, staff is investigating, looking into the ability to get either bike lanes or multi-use paths through that area by taking the sloped concrete below the bridge and excavating it back and getting some more space under there. So we've sent our crews out to survey that area. We're talking to consultants about that possibility, which would be, if possible, considerably less costly than a bridge over the highway.
Thank you.
Commissioner Whited?
I just had wanted some clarification on the one that's listed as Heritage Drive, 200 feet, York to Xerxes. Is that different than what our previous discussion was on from 56th to 60th and Xerxes, those smaller portions?
It is. Heritage Drive at that location on the south side, there's a series, I believe there are apartment buildings, and they have sidewalks that come out from the buildings to the street, and then sidewalks at that point run along the curb to the street, and I believe there are 4 units. They stop. So there's sidewalks, and then there's a series of gaps between each of those sidewalks, and so we were approached to look at filling those gaps with sidewalks in between those gaps.
Okay, then that was my only question is, can you refresh my memory then where we left the last conversation of filling in those pieces of sidewalk between 56th and 60th on Xerxes there? I remember there were some trees, and then I forgot where that conversation ended, if we're going to revisit sidewalks there.
That sidewalk is still high on our priority list, but it's also very high on the cost list, and staff is looking at ways which could be is a candidate for the slot that we have here in this plan, looking at ways to, instead of trying to construct all of that at once, look at ways to implement smaller pieces of it, like we're looking at doing on Interlochen here. So starting on places that are on either side of the large hill that's at 58th Street and perhaps south near 60th and kind of work our way that way and spreading a project like that over a couple of years. We've tried to get some funding from the county to little avail last year to help construct that sidewalk. So
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one comment that I have is that I didn't receive this document in my packet on the iLegislate, so I'm not sure why it didn't show up there. But I have fine neighbors here that shared with me. And then the only other comment I was going to hold for commissioner comments at the end is about another sidewalk, a sidewalk that I'd like to see along 66th Street on the west side of 100. But I'll talk more about that later.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Campbell?
I just had one quick question about the sidewalk that would go between 70th and 66th. Is that really as like a way for that kids to go home from school at Cornelia? Is that really the main objective of the sidewalk, or can you clarify?
It would connect the school and the
and
aquatic
like
center
Rawson.
as well. The
Oh,
pool.
okay, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just one more, sorry. I guess I didn't finish all my questions,
That's okay.
Marcia. So, again, I'm not sure, because I didn't have it on my list, so I'm not sure if this applies or not, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Valley View and France, I know there's a lot of activity that happened on France at different intersections, but that's one intersection that was really kind of untouched, I think. There's no sidewalks, there's no... this is the one that becomes 69th. This is the connector for people in that neighborhood to go to Southdale. Really, that's kind of the big connector there. So I don't know why that particular intersection was not part of the project. Maybe there was a good reason. I just haven't gone back to my old documents and notes, but that is a missing link, I think, in that whole project. Is that
Okay.
Valley View and France, 69th.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
No sidewalks, no. Yep, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other comments then on the proposed PAX funds projects? I actually had one other question. How will staff evaluate the amount that's set aside for miscellaneous sidewalk projects? And I'm understanding that there's approximately enough funding to do about 3,000 to 3,500 feet.
Several factors go into that in terms of how much bang for the buck that we would get for a particular project. There's the projects that have been discussed tonight, both Xerxes and Cornelia, are both on that list that we're considering for that sidewalk. It's just we have to do some additional cost estimates. Some other things to factor into it. Both of those projects already have some preliminary designs put together for those sidewalks, so that's very helpful in terms of getting it implemented quickly. Obviously, a sidewalk that, for instance, Cornelia is an example. It's on our active routes to school plan. It's recommended in that document, so staff has identified those sidewalks as higher priorities. So those are other factors that we would consider as well.
Okay.
One related question. Do we see the CIP, the draft CIP? Will that come to us? Or have we seen it already this year?
I feel like we saw it already this year.
Yeah,
didn't
we shared that several months back
Yeah.
Oh,
with
several
the
months
commission. Yeah, it was in draft stage then, and now is being, I believe it's being considered, hasn't been approved by council yet, but I believe it's either this month or next month. Must be next month.
Okay.
Commissioner Romo?
I had a question on the sidewalk on Vernon from Gleason to Blake. Would that go on the same side of the road as Bredesen Park? So then would they be redoing the sidewalk that is like part of Bredesen, but also a sidewalk on Vernon?
That sidewalk is, the way we're seeing it right now is on the other side where there is no sidewalk
Okay.
right now, and Vernon is an arterial, and so the way that sidewalks are defined in the current in the sidewalk facilities plan would need sidewalks on both sides, so we've identified
Okay.
that as a gap between facilities.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, great. Thank you for your thoughtful feedback and comments on that one. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the Traffic Safety Committee report. And we'll be reviewing this and recommending it to be forwarded to the City Council for approval. Were there any comments or questions on the traffic safety report? Commissioner Whited?
Sure. On the item A3, I'm just looking at the very bottom portion of that section where it's citing some old data there. Count done in 2005. Is that normal that we can make a recommendation based on that data, or we just didn't have the weather to do some newer data, or I just wanted some further information?
It typically depends on the availability of materials and staff, and so we did have a count at that point, which seemed to justify the need to look at safety issues on the street. So that was just the most recent count we had, and we were able to get into the report.
As a follow-up to that, am I understanding correctly on that recommendation that where the lane narrowed substantially, or where the bike lane narrowed substantially on Interlochen, we are now the proposed treatment for that is to actually sign it to indicate that the bike lane is ending?
That's
and
correct.
And then picking back up?
Yes.
Where we have sufficient width that meets state standards?
Right. That's correct.
Okay.
Staff felt that was a safer option than
suggesting that the bike
suggesting
lane
there
was
are
6
bike
inches
lanes
wide?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. That seems to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I have a follow-up on that one. Thank you. We've been asking for this for years, and so, I mean, by we, I mean Bike Edina. So thank you for addressing this now. I think that will really help people.
You're welcome.
And then
Go ahead.
another one. So on B3, it's more a comment, but so here's a case of not enough people were crossing to meet the warrants for a crosswalk, but who's going to cross France Avenue at 57th? So it's sort of like it's not a safe crossing. That's why people aren't crossing.
Right.
So that I just want to make sure that when we're looking at things like that, we're not thinking only in terms of the number, but also in terms of the context and why people might not be crossing.
Right. Staff had a discussion about that at this meeting. An example of that would be at 55th and Xerxes last year. There was a crosswalk that was requested, and the numbers came in one pedestrian under the threshold, but because there's a park located 1 block to the west, staff thought that it was justified to put a crosswalk in.
Okay, good. And then the B4.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt
Oh, sure,
just
go
for
ahead.
an add to that? Because I might say we tried to go that walk because I live on 58th and Chowan. I don't want to cross it because the sidewalk on the other side is literally about this wide, and it kind of just tilts towards the traffic, and it's kind of gravelly covered, so I'm kind of paranoid I'm going to slide into traffic. So there's more problems there than just not being able to crossing. I just wanted to add that. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's good, a good comment. B4, is that a clear view issue? I can't tell how close it is to the intersection.
We did talk to police about that issue, and as far as I know, that's being investigated, but I'm not sure what the outcome is on that yet.
Commissioner Iyer?
I have a comment on A2. Again, Commissioner Janowy, I kind of agree with you, is that there's some of these things we have to consider more than just the counts of pedestrians. I believe that there is there's no sidewalks on the south side here on 66th. And then I think this is an EHS bus stop as well, right there. So kids do have to cross that street there. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's worth looking at it again.
Is it possible to consult with the school district to check and see whether or not there's a bus stop there?
Yes, we can do that. Are you speaking at Southcrest?
Yeah. And actually, it would apply to Brittany, Normandale, all of those on that side over there. I think what's more important is eventually some kind of a sidewalk on the south side.
Yes.
Yeah. That'll fix all of those things. Then people can just walk over to West Shore and cross. Thank you.
Other questions or comments about the Traffic Safety Committee report?
Just curious what the cost of the rapid rectangular flashing beacon crosswalks is. Similar to the ones on Southdale Road and Cornelia, correct? On
It
66?
varies from $3,000 to $5,000
Oh.
total for the equipment, and then it's some additional cost for the striping. I'd have to factor that in. So it's about $5,000 per crossing.
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question on B2. the request for traffic calming on Highwood Drive from Vernon to Pine Grove Road. Did staff suspect that the increase there, perceived increase, was a result of detours from
Yes.
the 169 project?
Yes.
Okay, and so hopefully that'll be returning to normal, if it hasn't already.
Right.
Yeah.
Staff did feel the same way, yes.
Okay, all right.
And also for a time, Blake was shut down to one way, so I think he almost had to go through that way.
Okay. Okay, so we'll take a motion to move this on. If there aren't any other questions or comments?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of forwarding the Traffic Safety Committee report with comments for City Council approval, signify by saying aye.
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 Nay? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Moving on to updates. We'll start with our student members. Any questions or updates from you all?
I was just curious about the intersection of Benton and Tracy. It seems like in the mornings and at rush hour in general, people don't really, people have a hard time going straight. Like, it seems like you're going straight on Benton, but you kind of have to turn. And I think that people get really confused with switching blinkers, so I was wondering if there's any way we could clarify that in the intersection with signs or something. I don't know.
At Benton and Tracy.
Is it really a turn? Are you talking about when you're going westbound on Benton and you're heading to a countryside school?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a turn? I mean, that's a silly question. I mean, it's a jog, but are you turning? You're continuing on the same street, but it's not a street that's lined up.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
There, a little history. There was a proposal last year when that was getting redone to make that into a roundabout or a large kind of oval about, and we chose to keep the intersection the same because we felt that people that came to that intersection were confused enough that it made them stop and try to figure out what's going on, as opposed to a roundabout would have made the traffic not stop, and we didn't feel that was safe in a school zone when people are crossing the street to allow people not to stop, so or to keep them going. So we chose to keep them.
And to clarify,
keep the
it wasn't our
intersection the way it
position that
was.
roundabouts are unsafe, because actually there's a lot of data to support greater safety with roundabouts, but that one would have been particularly large in a neighborhood, just because of the configuration of that, like how the streets are offset and everything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
But you're right, that is a confusing intersection, and for a number of reasons, we decided to keep it that way, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
It was-
But there were more than that, just that reason.
It was land, it was, there just wasn't enough land there either, but.
Well, there was a 10-year look back showed no crashes at that intersection either. Yeah.
But great comment, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it's a goofy intersection.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll move on to Bike Edina. Oh, did you have? Okay, okay, that's what I thought, sorry. Didn't mean to skip you.
Yeah, we're in the student
Okay.
updates, come on. That's where it's at.
Bike Edina? No
Sure,
updates?
there
Okay,
are.
Living Streets Working Group, any updates?
There's not,
Nope, no updates.
Okay,
next month.
great, we are motoring. Walk Edina Working Group, Commissioner Becky was not able to join us tonight, but I have an update from her that I'll just read for the minutes and for the benefit of the commissioners. The press release was posted on the advisor blog announcing the establishment of Walk Edina as a standing working group of the ETC. It was posted on the blog, the city's website, and the city's Facebook page. At least 2 applications have been submitted, and Commissioner Betke has heard from a possible student applicant. So that's the status there. And then Commissioner Becky has also been researching the Walk Friendly Communities website and plans to begin filling out the Walk Friendly assessment tool, which will help with the application process for the designation, for the Walk Friendly Community designation. So that's the status there, and I imagine she'll be pulling in the new members of the Walkie Dyna group to help complete that application process as they get approved and get going with their work.
Chair, do they come here for approval, or is
Yes, yep, we will, Commissioner Becky, as the chair, will present the various applicants for approval to ETC, and then we approve their membership.
and is there is there a minimum number that's required to make it viable, or it's okay just because it's the first year we go with it?
I think there is a minimum. It's like I think it's like a minimum of 3 people, but there's no maximum.
Okay.
However, I think just for efficient, functioning of the group and being able to facilitate conversation in a, expedient way, there's probably an ideal number. But we'll see what comes in and what kind of interest there is, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Communications Committee. Our Communications Committee chair is also not here, but there hasn't been a meeting, so I imagine there's not really an update there either.
Jennifer did the advisory.
Advisor communication.
The advisor blog that was posted
No, the advisory on the skateboard.
In the parking ramps.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that'll be covered in staff comments.
Oh, okay.
I believe, or no?
I'll cover it now. I just,
Okay.
Commissioner Janovy reached out to me today regarding this advisory communication. It's going to be in council's packet on November 3rd.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, and the correspondence that we had, so we're moving on to correspondence on the agenda. We had some documents sent to us, or invitations sent to us to participate in the ongoing Vision Edina process that the city is undertaking to look at a long-term vision for the community. And there are several upcoming meetings where people have an opportunity to provide input. There are already public meetings on November 5th, 6th, and 19th at various times and various places throughout the community. You can also offer thoughts on speakupedina.org. And then anybody who's part of, a PTA or a church or a club or neighborhood association can also host a Vision Edina workshop. And if you can gather 10 or more people, then the city will do its best to try to assist you with bringing someone to help facilitate the conversation. So consider doing that if you have a group like that you're in touch with. And I think the more people that we get to participate in this process, the better the outcome will be. We need a diversity of perspectives and opinions, and it gets really important for people to participate and feel like we're developing a shared vision for where the community is heading. So I encourage you to participate or pull together a meeting or group. So that correspondence is in your packet. So we'll move on to chair and commission member comments, and maybe we'll swing back over here and start on this side.
Is it possible you can come back?
Sure, yeah.
Pass.
I just have a couple things. Again, like I mentioned before, I would like to see some activity. I know there's a lot of sidewalks that are in demand out there, but I'd like to see some activity on 66th Street. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, 66 west of 100 down to Ridgeview, there are no sidewalks. There's a city park, Normandale Park is along there, and there are a lot of walkers that walk there and walk to get over to the pool area in that park and that loop that goes around that park. So one comment I had made in the past was to potentially bring in a curb on Normandale. Normandale's a pretty wide street. I don't know that there's a huge need for parking along there. There are a few residents there that may have something different to say, but it's a pretty wide street, and I think we could carve out a 5-foot sidewalk, 6-foot sidewalk on that. Even just restriping it to stripe in a sidewalk and have it at the same level might be good. Anyway, And then in addition to that, the entire south of 66 along that whole neighborhood is Brookview Heights neighborhood, and that whole neighborhood, our neighborhood park is Normandale Park that's across the street to the north, and there are no crosswalks to get across on any of those. So I'd just like to bring up the fact that as we're looking at crosswalks, if we could stripe one of the roads to get to the park would be nice to see. Those are the comments about my neighborhood. Oh, and then I had a resident approach me this last week regarding signage on Olinger Road. We had just redone Olinger, and I don't know if it's complete yet, but we had put some new signs in along the way, and this particular resident has a fire hydrant, some green utility boxes, a stop sign, all in the front yard, all at different places. And now a new bike sign, I don't even know what it says, but a bike sign is planted like right in the middle of their only green space, contiguous green space on their lawn. So I was just wondering if there's any flexibility where those signs are placed, and if maybe engineering could take a look at that.
We can take a look at that. Typically, we try and place signs on a property line in between properties, but a lot of those signs are bike lane signs, begins and end signs, so there's some restrictions on where those go, but I'll take a look.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Whited. I just have a question. I noticed today on driving to work right there at 58th and France, one of the traffic light covers for the green light is like going to fall off. Do we report that to the county, or who do we call in for repair?
58th in France, I believe that signal's operated. Yeah, you would talk to the county.
Oh, okay. I'll talk to you offline if you know a phone number for me to call.
I can send you one.
Great,
yes.
thanks.
I was just going to follow up on Commissioner Nelson's comments that I thought there was an exception to, you were talking about crosswalks on 66 to get to Normandale Park. I thought there was exceptions to put crosswalks on streets to access parks, even if you did not have the required warrants. Yeah, isn't that true? Maybe I'm mistaken, but
we don't have a policy that states that. It's something that has been put in place in practice in terms of using engineering judgment, but I'm not sure if that would be the case here, but we don't have any policy that states that.
I did not have any additional comments. Thank you. But today is, actually I didn't. Today is the Festival of Lights, Diwali. So happy Diwali to everybody.
Oh, happy Diwali. Okay, I had a couple of questions. I've been following the conversation and resident comments on Speak Up Edina about the sidewalk plan with a lot of interest, and just noting that there's been really a lot of good activity there, and residents, kind of chiming in and offering comments and suggestions for the plan. I'm just wondering, Planner Nolan, if you could comment on how staff is taking into account some of the suggestions that residents are offering through their comments. And, I would say overall, from what I've seen so far, the comments have been overwhelmingly positive, and people saying, hey, you left this off, maybe not necessarily taking into account the criteria that were applied and identifying the various segments that are proposed for adding into the network. But I'm just wondering how staff is kind of taking the suggestions into account.
We're being genuine in terms of listening to folks and what they have to say. I think you brought up a good point about how we've gotten a lot of suggestions for people to have sidewalks on their streets, and those still have to be taken into account in terms of looking at the criteria that we have set. But there have been some interesting suggestions to consider other criteria that may not be so explicit in terms of trees and saving our trees, and staff and the city has made every effort to do so, obviously, in our sidewalk projects the past few years, but that could be something that's stated. Another suggestion had to do with looking at population density, and that's something that I've been trying to pull together these past few weeks and trying to take a look at least looking at that as another layer of information that we can look at our sidewalk map. So we are going to pull all those comments together. The comment period closes on October 27th, but we've started pulling them together now. We'll meet as staff and then discuss.
Okay. As a follow-up to that, I had a neighbor approach me and also saw another comment from another person on Speak Up Edina about the lack of sidewalks on Valley View Road north of where the 2015 project is ending, so closer to the intersection with Valley View and Gleason as it's kind of heading toward the high school and Valley View Middle School. And just, noting that the residents have for a long time kind of talked about the importance of adding sidewalk there to support kids and being able to, kids are walking that all the time and it's dark in the winter. And I'm just wondering if I tried to explain that, that first segment was getting done, starting at, I can't remember the name of the street now, but, the
Macaulay
more
Trail.
southern, Macaulay Trail. Mm-hmm. And that, it's ending at Mark Terrace, the southern point of Mark Terrace, because that's all the more we have funding for right now. But do you have any sense of when the next portion of that roadway might be reconstructed?
The only sense that we have is that it most likely won't happen in the next 5 years because it's not on the CIP. Okay. I've heard from several residents, maybe some of the same ones that you've spoken with and that you've seen comments from regarding those safety issues for pedestrians and residents wanting sidewalks for that stretch. And of course, obviously, we would reconstruct all the way to Gleason if we could, but we just couldn't. So it is on the sidewalk plan, and if priorities shift and other things happen, who knows? Given that we don't know when the rest of that road will be reconstructed, it isn't explicitly stated in the active routes to school plan as a recommended sidewalk. However, obviously, it does tie the neighborhood to the existing infrastructure that surrounds the high school. So it's something it is on a radar screen, but it's not in the CIP for the next 5 years.
Okay. And my last question or comment is just brought up again because of the Arden Park report and the neighborhood reconstruction reports that we've seen tonight is again just kind of about a question about right-of-way and the information and communication that we offer to residents about right-of-way and what they can expect. Just kind of frequently asked questions and giving people a better sense of what they can and maybe shouldn't do in the right-of-way, just in terms of long-term planning and planting and all of that, and kind of just facts. I'm just wondering, do we offer much in the way of information and communication about the right-of-way in front of people's homes, and is there something more that we can do?
Well, I'm sure there's more that we can do. I can't offhand tell you exactly what we provide outside of neighborhood project presentations or conversations with residents, but that's something we could look into. And the commission has brought this up in the past before, and I think it's a very valid point in terms of not just the right-of-way, but also sidewalks. And Commissioner Janowy quite a while ago gave me a list of some frequently asked questions and how to address those questions. So I think perhaps over the winter months would be a good time for staff to be able to look at these things.
Okay. Thanks. That was it. Commissioner Olson?
With all the pedestrian improvements that have happened along France Avenue, I noticed the other day that there's still no sidewalk on France Avenue right in front of Fairview Southdale Hospital. There's a major reconstruction or addition happening to that hospital right now, which I think is in the neighborhood of $40 million. I'm wondering if the city ever approaches these, businesses, nonprofits, whatever it might be, to say, hey, could you improve some of the pedestrian facilities on your property as part of this larger scale project, rather than using, city funds or county funds to do that work?
Not that I'm aware of. We do partner with businesses and commercial retail businesses in terms of working with them to get easements for sidewalks, but I'm not sure we've approached them about having to pay for a sidewalk within city right-of-way.
It would just be such an easy addition when they're doing all that major construction. Thank you.
I'm wondering if, the businesses in the community pay into the PAX fund as well, and so it seems reasonable for the construction of sidewalks on business properties to also be paid for from the PAX fund. I wonder if that one is sort of in the mix on the sidewalk plan, or identified on the sidewalk.
It's identified
plan?
in the sidewalk plan.
It is
as a future
okay.
sidewalk.
Yep.
It's not a very long stretch. I would like to add as well that, and I'm not having been directly involved in this, but staff is speaking with the county and the state in terms of pedestrian access across that bridge on France Avenue at that location, because those intersections are most. We have more crashes at those intersections than anywhere else in the city. So I think we're looking at ways to improve conditions there when the state looks to redeck France Avenue in 2 or 3 years. And so hopefully something could be combined with that type of project there.
Commissioner Janovi?
There is city code, and I can't quote it obviously, but there is city code that can requires developments to provide sidewalks. So my guess is it can be compelled. But that would be good. We maybe could use an update on what the Planning Commission can do, or what the Planning Department does in terms of requiring sidewalks. So I have 3 things. One is a comment from a resident on Olinger who mentioned that, how it's kind of windy, and that in places the vegetation is mowed back, but in other places it's not. And so he was saying that there are some issues in being able to see around the corner, and wanted more consistent trimming back of vegetation along Bredesen Park. One reason I mentioned the CIP is I was surprised to see, because I hadn't looked until my tab packet came last week, and that's my phone. Sorry, guys. But there's a roundabout that has been identified on Tracy at Valley Lane that I don't remember we've discussed. It's where the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail would cross Tracy at Valley Lane, and that roundabout's in the CIP, and I do think that's something that the Transportation Commission should discuss. And then the other questions, going back to the sidewalk plan, the comments online, and the person who had a question about the link between Park Lawn and Oak Lawn or Kellogg? Oak Lawn? Yep. Oak Lawn. And your answer is that there's a utility easement, and so can a utility easement be used for transportation purposes?
It makes it easier. This is the it was part of the series of projects that were involved with the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail and the Three Rivers Park District packaging of projects. So we were approved. The city was approved to get funding to construct that link at that location. Obviously, but there are still negotiations would have to happen with property owners. So that's I spoke with the city attorney about that, and that's still kind of up in the air. That easement is quite old, so it's sometimes called just an easement and sometimes just a utility easement. But any costs associated with that and with negotiations would be covered by the Park District if that were to happen.
It's just a follow-up. So right now it's not clear if it's a utility easement or if it might have a transportation purpose.
Well,
also.
I think it's more or less it is a utility easement.
Okay.
But it's in the active routes to school plan as well. It's a fairly logical, if we can make it happen, logical connection. We're also right now there's a solicitation out for TAP funding and to get some safe routes to school funds. We're looking at the sidewalk on Oak Lawn from that location north all the way to the school, and then around the west side of the school. That is in the active routes to school plan, and it would connect then the future trail and also the multifamily housing that's in that location. So this is something that staff is just starting to look at, trying to coordinate it with in 2017 when that link would be built.
Okay. Well, I'd be curious to know if utility easements can generally be used for transportation purposes, because I assume that there are utility easements in many places in the community, and then we can. A few years ago, Councilmember Bennett asked if staff could review all easements or all right of way that's not developed, and find shortcuts that can, to make connections between neighborhoods. And if utility easements can be included in that, that might open up more options.
I'll pass.
Do as promised and come back to Commissioner Campbell?
One quick question I had was, especially later at night on 66, kind of in reference to what Commissioner Nelson said, there seems to be a lot of speeding, I guess, coming in between the strip that splits Lake Cornelia. Is that something that we can address more or less? Because especially when there's the crosswalks, I believe, at Cornelia going to the Aquatic Center as well as 66 and West Shore. It seems as though those are very often missed, and it's kind of scary, especially for young kids, to picture them biking across or walking across to get to the park. Is that something that we address here?
When we notice excessive speeding or get reports through the Traffic Safety Committee report, staff usually refers those to PD for evaluation and potentially additional enforcement. So that is something that we can bring up.
Yes,
Okay.
you just did. So we can
there we go.
we can discuss this with PD and perhaps do some speed tests out on 66, and that's one of the reasons why we put those push button crossings at those two locations,
Yeah.
which they're brand new, and I think people are going to have to get used to them, and they'll get used a lot more next spring and summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was identified as an issue, and that's why those crossings were in.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, we're moving on to staff comments.
Okay. Quickly, looking at some of our local projects. Director Milner mentioned earlier about the Valley View Road reconstruction project that we were just talking about. It was approved by council as recommended on Tuesday, so that project is slated to move forward to get bids and for construction next year. So that happened on Tuesday. As he also mentioned last night, the sidewalk facilities plan was approved by the Planning Commission to be moved on to City Council to be considered for a comprehensive plan amendment. We continue to gather public input. And again, that public hearing for the sidewalk plan with Council will be on November 3rd. The current year's reconstruction projects are pretty much wrapped up. They're all complete with the exception of Morningside B. There's still some restoration, and I believe Ware Course, final surface course, may have gone on today. If not today, then by tomorrow. Similar with the France Avenue Pedestrian Improvements Project, everything is complete. There is, I believe, some striping to be done at 76th. Light poles will be installed in December. Those are the decorative tall light poles at the three major intersections being installed in the medians. That will happen in December. We did have a discussion with the county, and Commissioner Janovy was involved with some, she met some of us out, some staff and others out on the site here, I believe it was earlier this week or last week, about painting the signals that got somewhat damaged or things splashed on them. They got, during the construction process, and we were just told that the county told us that they've run out of funding and can't do that. So we're talking with them right now about ways to get them to find some additional funds to get that taken care of. The sidewalk projects for this year, York was done earlier. Vernon Avenue sidewalk from Ayrshire to Doncaster is complete on the west or northwest side of Vernon. I think that project turned out very nicely. Valley View sidewalk from Gleason to Chapel, the sidewalk's complete, and the retaining walls should be finished this week. We've been discussing the Olinger Boulevard Mill and Overlay project. A mill and overlay is complete, and striping, I believe, was completed today. If it's not today, it will be tomorrow, and the signs are already up. Xerxes Avenue Mill and Overlay, the county project. That project's complete. We've received a considerable amount of resident feedback regarding the aesthetics of those bump outs that the county had installed. Mostly residents, not residents that live on Xerxes, but residents that are in the Struckauer Park neighborhood, Chowan Park neighborhood, that are just to the west of there. And so the mayor has been receiving some correspondence as well. So the staff and the mayor are going to be meeting with Commissioner Callison and county staff to discuss potential aesthetic improvements for those bump outs, whether it's planters or something else. We're going to have that discussion. And I did want to discuss the 2015 meeting schedule. There was some confusion here with staff about this meeting being moved. Remember in December, the ETC approved this year's schedule, which had the meeting moved because it conflicts with MEA, with the school holiday. And so what I'd like to do is to bring this up, and I'm not sure if we put it to a vote, to make this some sort of a permanent change to the schedule, or because right now the City Council has already approved next year's schedule, which has at the third Thursday of every month, including in October. There's still time to change that. So I guess I'd like to put this to the commission in terms of what you all think about the October meeting.
Yeah, so I'd be interested in hearing from commissioners about their preference for this shift. I think I was probably one of the ones that asked to have it moved away from MEA weekend and to move to the following Thursday, but I'm recognizing that the following Thursday is tough for other commissioners for other reasons. And so I just wanted to get a sense of where everybody was at, if maybe indeed it is best to just leave it on that third Thursday of the month, and if people miss, they miss because it's MEA. Do folks have thoughts? Mm-hmm.
I support shifting October. It's often used by families to do something, so why have a potential conflict?
Okay.
Well, I don't see a lot of other people moving, so I was just going to make a motion that we make that permanent shift, and at least for 2015, and look for a second, unless there's other.
Maybe comment that as long as it doesn't land on Diwali every time, probably it's okay.
Has that been frequent? I would.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That was the comment I was going to make too. So I support the motion with the statement that as long as it doesn't conflict with the
Religious
city's
holiday.
religious observance calendar,
Yes.
which probably would have prevented this meeting tonight.
Yes. Okay, so the motion is that we move the October ETC meeting to the Thursday following MEA break, unless it conflicts with the city's religious observance calendar. Am I right? Okay, and there's been a second on that. Okay. Okay, so all in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
And nay? Okay. Motion carries. Sure.
My memory's not so good sometimes. Is there a dedicated bike lane on Olinger now?
There is for dedicated bike lanes on both sides of Olinger for the portion north of Olinger Road, which is about a third of the project, and for the portion on the other side of Olinger Road, there's bike lanes on the south side of the street, and then there'll be sharrows on the north side of the street, because we had wanted to leave parking on that side of the street.
So then, will that be on the council's agenda to add to this bike lane ordinance, the designation of bike lanes ordinance, section 26-280, that formally designates bike lanes, so that I think that's required by statute, some kind of formal designation. That's why we have the ordinance. And so those should be added.
I'll look into that ordinance. I need to familiarize myself with the ordinance. So, okay.
Any other comments from staff?
No thanks.
Okay. All right. Then we are adjourned. Thank you. I know.